Kika Young is a very strange girl. She has antisocial personality disorder, which means she is a psychopath. She is not able to feel emotions like a normal person. For this reason, her mother left her with her grandmother and sent money monthly so no one would discover she was her daughter. Her grandmother felt very bad for the girl, so she wouldn't suspect anything. She buried all the money. But many years later, Kika Young realized it and decided to confront her mother, who was living a very happy life. She had 2 other children and a happy family. The lady thought her daughter had come to ask her for money, but she no longer needed money or anything like that. She just wanted her to stop making her grandmother worry. She didn't want her to come near her or make her cry in any way anymore. After clearing things up with her mother, Kika Young decides to visit the country. She starts walking alone through the deserts, since being between life and death was one of the few things that made her feel something. While she was walking, she stumbled upon a teapot. Since it annoyed her, she hid it and threw it away, but the teapot appeared on the other side and made her trip again. Because of that, she rubs it 3 times and a man with very long hair comes out of the lamp. He recognizes her, but Kika Young didn't understand who he was, so she just throws the lamp away and leaves. Here we learn that in ancient times, God created the heavens and the earth. On the 4th day, he created the genies. And a day later, he created the angels. But as time went by, the genies became arrogant and wanted to have God's power. That's why he sent his angels to wipe them all out. After 300 years of fighting, only a few genies were left alive to replace them. God created humans, creatures without magic made of clay, since they were so fragile. He ordered the angels and the genies to bow before them, but the genie Ibli refused to do so. As punishment, God told him that he should grant 3 wishes to every human who finds his lamp. He decided to obey, but he would corrupt each of his masters. Centuries went by like this until a little girl found his lamp, and the 3 wishes she asked for were not for herself. No matter how hard the genie tried, he couldn't corrupt her, so as punishment, God locked him away. Until that human is reborn and he gets a second chance to corrupt her, and that human turns out to be Kion. After 900 years, they finally met again. When Kion returns to the hotel, the genie is waiting for her, and tells her that she won't be able to get rid of him until she makes her 3 wishes. The genie wanted her to be scared or excited like a normal human, but Kion didn't feel emotions, so she was unpredictable. The genie kept telling her over and over again that they finally met again, trying to understand why he was searching for her so much. Kion asks him to tell her his story. He says his servant searched for her for 900 years, but while he was telling his long story, Kion woke up. She asks him, what happens if he fails to corrupt her again? He says that then he will have lost, and his brother will cut off his head. He also tells her that she had reincarnated several times, but for some reason she always died young. Now that he had a chance, he didn't plan to waste it, but Kion was too cold and strict with her rules. She also had a lot of money, and to top it off, she had no emotions. So there weren't many things that could corrupt her. But the genie wanted her to lose her patience, so he kept asking her over and over to make her wish. Since only she could see him, other people thought she was crazy. Because of that, she tried to get rid of the lamp by every possible means, but in the end, it didn't work. The genie couldn't leave her until she made her 3 wishes. Because of that, she starts looking for another genie to wish for him to go away. But no matter how much she searches, she only finds Iblis. Because of that, Kion decides to follow the advice of his best friend and wants to make him so uncomfortable that he leaves on his own. But no matter how hard he tries, he can't do it either. The genie was forced to put up with his master, no matter how bad he was. When he finds that out, Kion decides to loosen up a bit and wants to do what his basest instincts tell him. That's why he throws the genie off the top of a skyscraper. He wanted to know what it felt like to lose control. The genie gets really angry and starts choking her to make her beg for her life, but Kion doesn't care. On the contrary, he seemed to enjoy it. This surprises the genie a lot, so he lets her go, thinking she would feel afraid, but she doesn't feel anything. Because of that, the genie says he'll do whatever it takes to make her suffer. And before she dies, he'll make her feel something. Later, he looks for his servant, who turns out to be a black jaguar that transforms into a human and has some magical powers. The next day, Kion returns to Korea, but although he left the lamp in Dubai, the genie follows him. At home, his grandmother is surprised to see him with a handsome man. It turns out that now people could see him. And since he can't get rid of him, he tells him to stay calm and not bother anyone. He becomes invisible again and annoys her until she loses control. Here we find out that, despite her condition, Her grandmother raised her very well, with very strict rules so that Kion could fit into society. Whenever something made her angry, she would listen to her watch to calm down. That way, she avoided hurting others. Also, even though she couldn't feel emotions, her grandmother taught her to understand them, so she could adapt to society without needing to feel them. Also, for years, she put a stone in her shoe so she wouldn't lose control when she felt uncomfortable. Because of all these rules, Kion wanted to leave. That's why he studied hard, got the best grades, and went to a good university. That's how he graduated with honors. Since he didn't fit in at any job, he returned to the village and opened his own mechanic shop. Now, the grandmother wanted to ensure Kion's new boyfriend was up to the task. So she asked him his age, where he studied, and what his grade point average was. Because of those uncomfortable questions, the genie makes himself invisible later. When he goes to the cyber cafe, he finds out that genies had a very bad reputation on social media. So he asks his servant to help him change that, but he only manages to get people to throw even more hate at him. The next day, we find out that not only did the grandmother raise Kion, but the whole town came together to raise her. That way, they managed to watch over her and calm her down. So that Kion, by the end of the day, was so tired that she would just fall asleep at night. The village chief found out that the psychopath had a boyfriend, so he and his assistants went to introduce themselves. Since he was the village chief, the genius greeted him by rubbing his nose, something that was done in the Middle East but not in Korea. Since the genius was very handsome, he left the chief confused. The next day, his servant explains to him that men in Korea don't greet each other like that. He also lets him try sweet pleasures. Then, the genius discovers video games and spends the whole afternoon playing because he couldn't win a single game. The next day, he plays with a boy, but again, he loses. That day, Kion went to climb a mountain. When he comes down, the genius asks him for money since he had spent it all on the arcade machine. Because of that, Kion ends up hitting him. Afterwards, his servant tells him that he doesn't need to ask his mistress for money since he also has money. The next day, Kion goes with Minji, his best friend. She was very angry because he hadn't told her about the man he arrived with. She tells him that he brought him because he puts up with his bad behavior. Because of that, his friend tells him that it's already much too late. The genie locks Kion up to threaten her, telling her that he will burn down the whole village if she doesn't make her first wish. But she, annoyed, tells him that she doesn't care. Kion is upset because he interrupted her workout routine. Afterwards, she manages to get out and starts beating him up. When the firefighters arrive, the fire had already been put out, but they find Kion beating him up. The genie tells them not to interfere, that she's hitting him because he deserves it. At night, Kion goes to eat with her friend. Since they met, they've always eaten the same thing every Wednesday. Since she was a psychopath, she sticks to her routine. She can't do anything else, so she doesn't lose control. She also says that when her grandmother dies, every night the rules in her routine will die with her. Unsure of what might happen without her grandmother, she decided to leave with her. So she had 2 coffins made. Her friend tells her to think about it because she's sure that no one will miss her. The genie had heard this and Kion starts yelling at him not to spy on her. But the genie had made himself invisible. So to keep the people from thinking she's crazy, she tells him to wear a brooch every time he turns invisible. Also, since she's already tired of him bothering her, she tells him that humans are good and that they never... The genie tells her that's not true, that humans are bad by nature. That's why they make a bet. The genie will grant 3 wishes to the first 5 living beings they encounter. If he manages to corrupt them, then she will lose her wishes and he will be able to destroy her. Kion doesn't really care, so he accepts the deal, and on the way home, they start looking for the 5 lucky ones. The first is Mrs. Park, the second is Miss Kim Kion, and the third is Bogey, a stray dog that was passing by. The fourth is Sante, and the last one is a YouTuber who moved to the village. The genie tells him that he just made a mistake, because in the world he's also known as Satan. That is to say, he was the most evil genie that exists, capable of corrupting each and every one of his masters. The next day, the genie's servant tells him that he made a mistake, since Kion used his first wish for the good of others. Now he only has 2 wishes left to be able to corrupt her. Since he didn't want to lose, he decides it's better to stay away and wait for her to die of old age, and then corrupt her in her next life. That's why he gets on his flying carpet and goes up to the sky. But now the airspace also had an owner, and some airplanes quickly intercept him. Because of that, he nearly causes an international conflict. And since he can't fly without permission, he decides to return to the ground. He starts investigating how Kion ended up being reborn as a psychopath. So he goes to the past to see her previous lives. That's how he discovers that she felt a lot. She always helped others over herself. Maybe that's why God made her be born without emotions in this life. Also, the genius notices that the village chief was always with her, at least in her 2 previous lives. Since he didn't find much in the past, he returned to the present. And Kion realizes that the genius can alter history, so he wants to make sure he remembers everything. For that, he needs an angel's feather, so if something changes, Kion will be able to remember it. The angel was the genius's brother, so to steal the feather, Kion is thrown from the building. To save him, the angel opens his wings and Kion takes advantage of this and manages to steal a feather. Then, the genius tells him they have unfinished business to settle, so they start fighting. And, to hurt him even more, the genius destroys the angel's building. Since he was very ambitious, that was what hurt him the most. Then we see that Kion starts writing in his diary, and that's how he discovers that it doesn't let you lie. You can only write things that are true. At the same time, the village chief was doubting his sexuality because of the genie's greeting. He started to feel things, but one of his assistants tells him not to feel strange, because that's the traditional way of greeting in the Middle East. That's how they greet the important men of each region. When he finds out about this, he is very happy and tells his wife that their marriage is no longer in danger. The next day, she was mistreated by the assistant manager because of her deep resentment. The genie appears since it was the perfect moment to corrupt her. At first, she gets scared and doesn't believe anything he says, but just in case, she makes her wish. She wishes to be the store manager so she would have a higher position and be above the assistant manager who mistreated her earlier. The genie wanted to meet Mingi. Here we find out how the two of them became best friends. It turns out that Mingi was bullied at school and she threatened the bullies that she would burn down the school if they touched her again. Since the bullies, they couldn't handle Kion, they were afraid of her, so they accepted her conditions. Then she forced Mingi to be her best friend, made her study hard so she could get good grades and they could go to college together. That's how Mingi managed to get ahead. That's why she was very grateful to her. Later, we also found out that the angel's assistant was also a beast, but she was an owl and the assistant was a jaguar. They were in love, but since they were servants, they couldn't be together. The next day, the genie's servant started working with Kion, and that's how he found out she had another job. She was an investor in the stock market, that's why she had a lot of money. The workshop was just a front. Also, she had a very meticulous routine. Once a month, she went diving, once a month, she went mountain climbing, and every Wednesday, she ate at the same place. But the chilling. She used it for her own death, meaning that when her grandmother died, she would follow her. Would she make everyone believe it was an accident while diving or from a fall on the mountain? Upon learning this, the genius decides to keep the grandmother safe. That's why he does all the housework so she doesn't have to exert herself and can live a long life. But since he was so attentive, the lady asks him how he fell in love with her granddaughter. He tells her that he waited his whole life and that she is different from all the women he met because when he strangles her, she goes crazy. The grandmother tells him to stop saying those filthy things and to get to cleaning the field instead. Then her servant arrives to tell her that it fell. She asked him how she died in her past life and what she did to make the genie hate her so much. Apparently, she didn't remember anything. The genie tells everything to his servant, but he says it out loud. Kion was right behind him, so he hears everything, although he didn't seem to care much. Then he goes shopping and takes the genie with him to carry his things. After eating, Kion tells him that he wants to go to the top of a tower since he fed him. The genie agrees when they are up there. She tells him that she likes him, but it's not something romantic since she can't feel emotions. She just enjoys having him around. Is it like her car or like a very useful tool? The genie wants to take advantage of this to corrupt her, so, to captivate her, he turns off all the lights. Here, Kion follows the advice of her friend Mingi, who had told her that when a man shows you the stars, the kiss comes next. So she was waiting for that. The genie didn't want to kiss her, so Kion decides to take the first step. But after kissing him, she didn't feel anything. So she thought it was a waste of time. The genie tells her that's not how it's done, and then teaches her an Arabic kiss. This time, it's completely different. In fact, Kion gets excited, and the next day she asks the genie to kiss her again. Every time she sees him, she asks him to kiss her, but the genie keeps telling her, no. No, that's when certain rules, for example, to kiss, she must cry that day and also drink a little alcohol. With the Soka, Kion calms down and stops insisting so much. But throughout the week, she would ask every day, "When will I see you so I can kiss the genie again?" But unfortunately for her, it would be sunny all week. The genie was scared because he liked it too, but his servant tells him not to worry because kisses are the gateway to corruption. So the genie decides to use this to his advantage. His servant tells him that if he's going to kiss her again, he shouldn't be rude and should get his teeth cleaned. That's why he goes to Minji's clinic, and since it was his first time at the dentist, he feels very uncomfortable. But when he finished, he didn't have any money to pay, so he tells her that he's a friend of Kion. When she finds out, she was furious. The genie tells her not to worry because when his job as a fruit gamer pays off, he'll give her back all the money he owes her. Kion gets upset and says he's terrible at video games, so he'll never be able to repay her. After hitting him, she punishes him even more, starts the car while the genie was drinking a beer. And that was illegal in Korea, so they end up arresting him to get rid of the charges. He pretends to be Arab, but a police officer knew the language, so he has no choice but to leave his servant as a replacement. Later, he goes to the Cherry Blossom Festival, but while he's walking, a criminal steals the brooch that Kion gave them. Apparently, thieves from another town had come to make the effort, but the local criminals confront them to defend their territory. But before they can fight, the genie arrives and changes their weapons into flowers. When night falls, everyone watches the fireworks show. The genie takes advantage of that to send a message to Kion, but instead of writing something nice, he writes that it's infernal. When Kion sees it, he thinks it's beautiful. But at that moment, the angel arrives and warns her that the genie will destroy her if he corrupts her. But she replies that she already knows. Because of that, the angel becomes uncomfortable since he has no emotions and can't understand her. Minji and the genie go out drinking. Despite everything, they get along well and have a great time together. But in the end, Minji drank too much and left without paying the bill. Since the genie didn't have any money, he gets arrested again until Kion frees him. The genie says his brother, the angel, dislikes him because he'll eventually be the one to behead him. But he also tells him that he has other brothers, whom he does like, other genies who have different powers. Some control sleep, others control plants, and there's even a genie who controls the weather. Kion wants him to find that one so it will rain more often and they can kiss. The genie gets scared and runs away. The next day, Mrs. Park had become corrupted by her new position. She treated her coworkers very badly, and since she used to have the same position as them, none of them respected her. Because of that, she makes her second wish, to go back 20 years and have a better position. Since the genie went back to the past, he took the opportunity to visit Kion. There, he started talking with her and created new memories that became embedded in Kion's mind. But she was much worse as a child and ends up hitting him really hard on the head. At night, it starts to rain, and that means it's time for the kiss. Kion was happy, so she bought beer and went looking for the genie in all the places he usually goes. But the genie hid well, and she couldn't find him anywhere. He showed up just when it stopped raining, and because of that, Kion was very angry. Later, the genie granted wishes again, and this time it was the puppy's turn. He wished to be a handsome man, 40 years old. When he walked down the streets, all the women turned to look at him. But they were disappointed when they saw him act like a dog. The next day, Kion's grandmother finds her diary. To keep her secret from being discovered, she decides to hide it in the genie's lamp. When she goes in, she discovers that it was a very lonely place. So she decides to remodel it and gives him some furniture so it doesn't look so ugly when they're done remodeling. They arrive and the grandmother screams when it starts raining again. That means one thing. It's time for the kiss. Without alcohol, they decide to go to the store. But when they go out, they find the grandmother crying because one of her friends had died. Because of that, Kion feels afraid or something like that, so he uses his next wish to make his grandmother young again. But so that no one suspects, he decides to postpone it for 2 days. He tells his grandmother to get ready for a long trip because the two of them will go to Hawaii the next day. We see that Mrs. Park, even though she had everything she wanted, wasn't happy because of her job. She neglected her daughter, and her daughter ended up pregnant. So she wondered if she should use her third wish. Then the day of the trip finally arrives. That would be the day when the grandmother would become young again. When the grandmother looks at herself in the mirror, she doesn't recognize herself. When she realizes it, she faints, because something like that shouldn't be possible. That's why she faints every time she looks in the mirror. When the angel found out that Kion didn't faint, he was very happy and told the genie that he will soon lose and that he can't wait to cut his throat. The genie tells him not to bother him and to look for him when he is lost, Then the little dog arrives. He says he doesn't know how to live like a human, so he wants to have a lot of money and someone to take care of him like the genie. He couldn't create money out of nothing. He decides to steal from his brother and give everything to Poppy, so he gets her a very handsome bodyguard. And as his first act, he goes to some juvenile delinquents who had beaten him up in the past. He warns them not to bother the stray dogs again because if they do, he'll bite them even harder. And so they don't report him. He throws them some money. At the same time, we see that the grandmother wanted to take advantage of her second youth. So she goes out on the street wearing Kion's best clothes. Because now his grandmother was behaving like a little girl, he tells her that they have to follow some rules. She must change her name and she must not reveal her true identity to anyone. The grandmother accepts without protest because she was very excited about this second chance. Now that she was young, she didn't want to cook anymore, which means the genie was left without food. That's why, upset, he went to sit in an empty seat, but that empty seat was for job seekers. So he gets hired to work in a lettuce field. At the end of the day, he did a lot of work, and they gave him food on top of that. They paid him, so the next day he got another job. At night, Mr. Goo hit a deer with his car. The genie wanted to corrupt him, so he appears at that moment and tells him he will grant him 3 wishes. Mr. Goo doesn't believe him, so he asks him to bring the deer back to life. The genie grants his wish, and the deer runs away. Because of that, Mr. Goo gets very angry. But the genie warns him to control himself and to think carefully about his second wish. The next day, it turns out that Kion's classmate moved to the village with that boy. She had gone to a dance club, and when the genie found out, he got jealous and went to the past to hurt him. Then we see that the village chief went to introduce himself to the owner of the house. Kion's classmate tells him to leave and that they're not interested in being part of the village. At night, we see that the grandmother wanted to take out the money she had buried, but Kion told her that she had already used it, and he donated most of that money to charity. With the other part, he started his investments, so his grandmother doesn't have to worry about money anymore. The next day, the grandmother and Mingui run into each other, since they already knew each other. The grandmother can't help but get emotional, but since she can't reveal her identity, she tells him that she's new in town and that they'll be seeing each other often. Then we see that Miss Kim was having problems because of Kion. How did they study together? The bank manager wanted her to convince her to invest more money in the bank, so he would get a juicy commission. She tells him she doesn't really know her and they're not friends, but the manager says it doesn't matter, and she must do it to keep her job. Then, while she's washing the dishes, the genie appears. He tells her that he will grant her 3 wishes. She isn't scared and quickly makes her first wish. It turns out this was something she had been waiting for her whole life. As her first wish, she wants all of Kion's money. She doesn't want to be rich. She wants the money that Kion had in his account. But since the genie respects the financial system, he could only transfer 10 million to her every day. Although for the girl this was enough, since that wish directly affected Kion. The genie starts mocking her and tells her she'll lose the bet, but she, as cold as ever, tells him she doesn't care. Later, when she touches the urn, she remembers some fragments of her past life. The next day, the grandmother goes out to the street again, and this time she meets Minji. And since they get along very well, Kion feels jealous, something he hasn't felt in a long time. Then, El Angel realized that his brother stole his money. The genie tells him that he didn't actually steal it, he just donated it to a dog with a lot of pedigree. Because of that, they start fighting, but this time, the winner is the genie. At night, El Angel goes to Kion to ask him to make a fair wish so he can defeat his brother. She says she's not interested, but El Angel tells her he'll take her to the past to show how the genie tricked her. But Kion tells him no again, and then hits him with a shovel. The next day, we find out that this angel was the angel of death. That's why he was accumulating money, so that no one would suspect he was death. Meanwhile, the genie became so obsessed that he played with both hands. Because of that, a boy asks him to let him play because he doesn't want to go back home, and the genie listens to him because he has things to take care of. Apparently, Mrs. Park had a lot of problems. Her daughter was going down the wrong path, and even though she tried to change her twice, she couldn't do it before making her wish. They used to be best friends, and she was very dedicated at school. But now it seemed like her daughter hated her and had completely lost her way in life. Because of that, she wants to save her third wish for when it's really necessary. At the same time, the grandmother wanted to dress more fashionably, and since she was the same size as Kaijon, she wore her clothes. When she goes out, she meets Mingi, and they get along very well. But the grandmothers were starting to get suspicious because the girl looks a lot like their friend when she was young. One of the ladies thinks that somehow she became young again, So they go to her house to demand that she identify herself there. Also, they want Kion to show proof that her grandmother is in Hawaii. Everyone thought it was crazy, but the grandmothers were very stubborn. In the end, the village chief calls Grandma Pangu, and to his surprise, this time she answers. She tells them that she's fine and that she won't return to the village for a long time. Because of that, the grandmothers calm down, but they don't apologize. As for Kion, it turns out the genie had saved them. But Kion felt bad for putting his grandmother in that situation. Because of that, the genie also feels bad, so he goes out to the street to reflect on it. A girl approaches him and tells him that she noticed he needs help. The genie answers yes and starts telling her his story. She gets scared and runs away, but the genie wanted to keep venting, so he goes after her to keep telling her. After running, he arrives at a betting house. A nice guy offers to lend him money. He accepts without hesitation, and as a thank you, he wanted to greet him with his nose. But because of that, he is reported for harassment. The police inform Kion, and she, annoyed, orders the genie to make himself restless so she can hit him as much as she wants. The next day, Miss Kim was furious because Kion couldn't give her all the money at once. She could only give her 10 million each day. That's why her second wish is to increase her limit. Since everything had to be done legally, Kion personally goes to increase her limit. Because of that, Miss Kim receives more money. Later, the genie returns with his friend. He wanted to play at the arcade all afternoon. But he discovers that the boy had a bruise, and the boy tells him that his stepfather hits him, and he wishes he were bigger so he could defend himself and his mother. The genie takes pity on him and tells him that he will grant him a wish in exchange for 101. The boy agrees, and that's how the genie sends the boy's stepfather to the desert. There, he makes his dogs devour him so that he will be in a coma for 8 years. The next day, we see that Poppy was desperately looking for her owner, the handsome bodyguard. She felt really bad for him, because she thought he had been treated so badly that her boss truly believed he was a dog. Miss Kim also had problems. In the modern world, you can't just take someone else's money and spend it as if it were your own. Her bosses saw that a lot of money from Kion was being transferred to Miss Kim's account, and that's why they accused her of fraud. She says she doesn't know anything and that it's not her fault Kion sends her money, but obviously no one believes her. That's why her boss orders her to fix things before they get investigated. Later, we see that Kion goes to visit the angel. Now he wants to go back to the past to see how he died. Here we find out that Kion was a girl who was bought as food for wild dogs. Because of this injustice, the genie decided to look for the girl to corrupt her. But as her first wish, she asks for her brother to be saved and to have a very long life. But a long life requires sacrifices, so the genie gets rid of all the evil men. Then, as her second wish, the little girl asks that no other child with a good heart be sold as food for the wild dogs. That's how the genie blocks their trade routes. At that moment, the angel appeared. He tells the girl that because of her 2 wishes, hundreds of people died. So he asks her to choose her third wish carefully. This makes little Kion feel guilty. The genie tells her to stop crying, to learn that the world works this way. For one to live, another must die. Then he lets the dogs bite her and tells her to wish to save herself. But the girl ignores him, and as her last wish, she asks for both of them to be punished. Then, unfortunately, she dies. God heard that, and that's why he punished the genie. Kion had also gone back to the past and had seen that whole story. When he approached the genie, he realized that the genie was deeply remorseful. There was no trace of hatred on his face, only deep sadness. When he touches him, the hourglass starts to move and some memories flood the genie's mind. Moreover, her heart begins to ache as she sees her past life and the relationship she had with the genie. Kion is willing to accompany her on the painful path of punishment. The next day, the genie wants to make Kion fall in love so that she becomes desperate and wants to have him all to herself. But his assistant knows that psychopaths can't feel love. Still, the genie tries. And here we get 2 very nice references. The first is to Glory, and the second is to a character that the actor played at the beginning of his career. Kion doesn't pay much attention to it and asks him if what he felt for her in the past was hatred. The genie tells him yes, but Kion says that he saw his face and it was one of deep sadness. Then the genie changes the subject and starts talking about his ex, Kion. He gets very angry and then wants to hit him. Meanwhile, we see that Mrs. Park arrives late to work because she had problems with her daughter. Because of that, the boss fires her. This makes her furious, and she tells them they will regret having done it. Meanwhile, Poppy, with the help of her bodyguard, manages to find the house where she used to live. Seeing him act like a dog, the bodyguard can only think about how hard his life must have been. Then, the YouTuber receives a message from a genie. Thinking it was a joke, he asks the genie to record a special event. So, the genie sends him to the mountain, and while he's walking, he discovers a corpse. Because of that, his video goes viral. The body that was found was a woman's. That's why everyone in the village starts saying that the psychiatrist is responsible. Grandma hears those rumors, and because of that, she feels really bad and asks her granddaughter not to hurt anyone, even if they make her angry. Then, while Kion was cutting grass, Miss Kim arrives. She asks him to go to the bank and say that everything is fine and that she is transferring her money voluntarily. Kion tells her that he won't do it. Miss Kim threatens to use her last wish against him, but Kion confesses that he also has a wish left, and he's sure he'll use it after her. Because of that, someone who has nothing to do with the husband, and is a non-husband. And it's a video that has to do with, with her husband's life. And it's a video, no, nothing husband, and it's nothing to do with her husband. It's a video, not the husband's life, that with husband, and it's a video that has nothing to do with. It's a video about her husband's life, and it's a video that doesn't. Nothing to do with the things of another rich family. Then the genius's assistant also arrives. That's when she decides to call the police, but Kion tells her that it's not what she's thinking and to please trust her. The next day, Mr. Gu receives the lamp again, which means he can make his second wish. He wishes to go back 20 years in time to confirm something he had always suspected. But since he didn't specify the time, they had to wait until nightfall. It turns out that the one who buried the body in the mountain was Mr. Gu. Apparently, he was also a psychopath, but he was a bad one when he committed his crime. Someone saw him, but he never knew who it was. Now, after 20 years, he would finally find out. This way, he confirms that it was his own mother who discovered him, but she never reported him. When he returns to the future, he hugs her and thanks her for not reporting him. Then, the genius tells everything to Kion. She tells him that he is a serial killer, and that he is the killer of the blonde girl. So, is she going to trick him into using his third one? Later, we see that another genie had appeared. This was the dream genie, and he put everyone to sleep to deliver a message to his brother. The next day, we see that the dream genie tied Iblis with a magic rope that he couldn't break. The genie knew that the angel's assistant couldn't lie, so he asked her what happened, and she told him it was his brother, the dream genie. That's how he realizes it was a hidden message. Then, Kion, somehow, he knew that besides her, it could be him. Since everything was very strange, the genie asks his brother what happened. He tells him that the dream genie surrendered to his new master and that he also bound him. His master was none other than the boy whom Iblis had saved. Apparently, by giving him so many lives, he became immortal. In the afternoon, we see that the boy had formed an organization. Everyone called him father, and since he was immortal, he could never grow up. He captured the dream genie and had him under his control. His mission now was to capture Iblis. He wanted to have the power of the most powerful genie. At the same time, Kion experiments with the magic thread. Apparently, it doesn't work on humans. The only ones affected are spirits. But what's curious is that the only one who can break those threads is Kion, the beast of the genie. He reveals that it smells like blood, meaning they were magic threads because blood was used to make them. Then we see that for years, the immortal boy collected orphans. Much worse things than what they did to him when he was a child. The next day, they continue investigating the body they found. The psychopath was very excited because one of his works had come to light. Because of that, Kion goes to tell him that she knows he's the killer. And she also tells him that he's a rookie and made a lot of mistakes. The psychopath is happy because now they are the same. He tells her that she can join him in his next crime, but Kion tells him to fix the mistakes he made first. This was her plan to make him use his third wish. And so she tells the genie that there is a 20-year mistake in his story, but the genie doesn't remember any of that. So they go to the desert to look for answers so no one will suspect. They invite Minji and the grandmother, and to pay less, they only buy 2 tickets. The others hide inside the lamp. Then they go to look for another genie. Here appears Genie, Iblis's ex-girlfriend. She and Kion don't get along well. The genie says he lost 20 years of memory and traveled to the desert to discover what happened. She tells him that his memories were sealed, that a long time ago, Kion didn't die in the desert, but actually lived for 20 more years. And during those 20 years, he met the genie again. But since his memories had been sealed, he wasn't allowed to talk about it. Meanwhile, the angel goes to look for another genie. He was in charge of the flowers. She warns him not to tell Iblis anything about his sealed memories, but it was already too late because Genia had already told him. The angel, angry, takes it out on his servant and ends up taking away his voice. For his part, the genie starts having many flashbacks from those 20 years he can't remember. Also, his sword was stuck. Hundreds of years passed there and he had completely forgotten about it. Kion tells him he can't take it because now it's a tourist attraction. Afterwards, Kion takes the grandmother to a very special place. Her daughter lived in Dubai and she hadn't seen her for many years, so he takes her so she can. Back in the village, we see that the life Mrs. Park had always wanted was not what she expected. With her 2 wishes, her daughter ended up the same way. Also, she was going to divorce her husband. So, to fix everything, she asked the genie to forget that she made 2 wishes. But that wasn't possible. And the one who forgets everything is Mrs. Park. When Kion finds out, he thinks he's going to lose, but he doesn't feel bad about it since if he wins, the genie would die. Also, he learns about an unspoken rule. The human makes their 3 wishes, forgets absolutely everything, forgets that they met the genie, and forgets their life before the wishes. Because of that, Kion no longer wants to make his 3rd wish, because he doesn't want to forget the genie. Later, the leopard finds out that the angel took away his assistant's voice, so he goes straight to bite him. Since he was more powerful, the genie has to go to confront him. So they fight again, and this time it ends in a draw. The angel warns that he must be careful since no one besides him can take the child's life. Besides, that little demon was willing to do anything to become his master. The worst part is that this boy is the son of the dream genie, which means he is his nephew. Meanwhile, Kion was out for a walk in the mountains. Suddenly, his companion arrives and tells him to make his 3rd wish or else he will throw her off the cliff. She ignores him and the man ends up pushing her, thinking she would die. She sees her life flash before her eyes, but the genie arrives to save her. The angry one buries the man in the mountain. At that very moment, Elangel goes to the immortal boy and warns him to stop interfering with his plans. Kion must make a fair wish, no matter what happens, so he can cut off his brother's head. After all these problems, the genie goes to visit his brother, the flower genie. He wanted to know what happened during these 20 years that he remembers. That's how we discover the truth about the immortal boy. It turns out he's the son of the dream genie, the very weak one. His human body couldn't withstand his power, so the flower guardian exchanged their souls. That's why the garden dried up. And the only flower that survived was the immortal's flower. At the same time, Poppy is reunited with his former owner. Even though he treated him badly, Poppy still cared about him. And he also loved his little brother very much. The little boy was the only one who could recognize his dog like that, even though he looked like an adult and he played with him. The next day, the grandmother goes to her volunteer work. There, the angel arrives and tells her that he has bad news for her. Even though she became younger, her lifespan did not change. He tells her that she will die as scheduled. When she sees the cherry tree in her garden bloom, her life will be over. However, to comfort her, he tells her that she will go to heaven. At the same time, Kion gets his money back, and since he wanted revenge, he withdraws it all in cash and no longer wants to work with that bank. At night, the immortal boy goes to Kion. He wanted to force her to make her last wish. But Kion was already prepared, and since she wasn't afraid of him, she attacks him. Also, the genie's servant was with her. And in the end, the village chief arrives as well. Kion warns the village chief that he has just gotten himself into a very strange problem. But he shouldn't tell anyone about it, and that his only mission will be to protect Minji and her grandmother. The chief doesn't hesitate and tells him he can count on his full support. The genie also does his part and goes to his brother to tell him that they must stop his son. The son, the dream genie, tells him he's right, and even though it hurts, he's willing to help him. Then we see some criminals found out that Ko withdrew her money in cash, so they want to rob her. But since she wasn't afraid of them, they end up beating her. At that moment, the genie arrives, and when he finds out she was beaten, he opens the gates of hell and pushes all those thugs in. But Kalan had also followed him, so the genie takes the opportunity to ask her for more food or else he'll leave her there. When they come out of hell, the genie tells her everything he had discovered. But before he can continue talking, Poppy arrives. Poppy wanted to make his last wish. He wanted to be a dog again. It turns out he had cancer. Since his owner couldn't afford the surgery, he left him on the street to die. Now Poppy was going to die. He didn't want to be saved, but to spend his last days with his little brother and his owner. Then we see Kahan and the genie go for a walk. The genie took her to the past when the cherry blossoms fall, since that was her favorite place. And also, that's when his feelings for her changed. The next day, the grandmother was very depressed, since the angel had told her when she would die. For his part, Minji discovers that the grandmother's teeth were exactly the same as the x-ray of the young girl. For his part, Mrs. Parr's mother-in-law had flashbacks of her past life, when her daughter-in-law, although poor, was happy. Kaja knew the truth and realizes that making a wish at first seems like a blessing, but in the end, it only brings misfortune. Then, Keijon goes to the genie's lamp and discovers that there were many hidden messages that only she could see. The messages were for the Keijon from 900 years ago. She didn't die when she was a child, but lived until she was 28 years old. But before revealing more, the psychopath makes his third wish. He wishes to go back to the past to get rid of the blonde girl. That way, he wouldn't just get rid of the evidence, but he could kill her twice. But this was part of Kashan's plan. So she gives her diary to the Kashan from the past. She can't doubt herself, so she follows the plan to the letter. The psychopath had forgotten everything and didn't understand why he was reliving everything again. But before he could hurt her, Kahan arrives. Since she no longer needed to hold back, she takes the opportunity to get even, so she beats him up. Then, she tells the police everything, and the girl takes the chance to thank Kajan. He feels good because it's the first time someone has thanked him when he returns the newspaper. Those memories get stuck in his mind, and that makes him fall even more in love with the genius. He's in love too, so they kiss without needing it to rain. At the same time, we see that Miss Kim was frustrated because she already made her 2 wishes and didn't get anything at all. The YouTuber tells his wife about the wishes. At first, she doesn't believe him. But after he insists, they both start thinking about what they could wish for to get the most out of it. She wants to wish for money and use the other wish to save her father from the cancer he had. But the guy tells her not to because money solves everything. Even with his illness, there was no chance. The next night, Iblis talks to his brother to get him to reveal the whole truth about what was happening. The angel says he won't reveal anything and that she must discover the truth on her own. In the morning, one of the grandmothers went to see her son, but he didn't treat her well, even though she pretended he did. She told all her friends that they got along very well and that her children were perfect. Then, at lunch, we see that the grandmother wanted to entrust her grandson to the genius. So she started treating him better, so he wouldn't leave her granddaughter alone. But she gets furious because her favorite part was the chicken leg and she wouldn't let anyone else eat it. Seeing how they get along, the grandmother is happy because if they argue, it's because they care about each other. After eating, they plan how to face the immortal boy. The genie tells her that only she can make the wish and it has to be a fair one, so that the boy can't use his power. At the same time, the YouTuber's wife wanted to get a divorce, since he didn't want to use his wish to save her father. He tells her that the wishes are his and that he won't give her anything at all. For her part, the grandmother is preparing for death. Although she wanted more time as a young person, she says it's enough. Kion realized that, so he wanted to have normal memories with his grandmother. The genie, for his part, felt good for having helped his playmate. Now he, happy like his stepfather, left. No one hit him, and that's why he came home earlier. A few days later, the grandmother takes Minji to take lots of pictures and do many fun things. Sometime later, Kion returns to the desert, where she discovers that the children of the immortal boy were following her. But before they attack her, Genia comes out to defend her. She went there to ask her to tell her the truth. Genia tells her a few things, but explains that God forbade her from talking about it, and if she wants to know the truth, she must discover it on her own. Back in the village, we see that the YouTuber's wife made a drastic decision. She deleted her YouTube channel because she couldn't be with a man as selfish as him. The guy, angry, makes his second wish. He wants his wife to forget everything about the wishes. After that, we see that the genie also went to Dubai. He hugs Kion to try to remember what happened 900 years ago, and that's how he manages to see how she died. She tells him that maybe that's why he released his anger and made her see gold. Neither of them understood what was happening, so they decided it was better to go on a date. The genie uses his power to be romantic. Then, Kion tells him that he wants to dance. The genie confesses that he doesn't know how to do it, but Kion tells him he just needs to follow him. They both dance and say nice things to each other in their own way. The next day, one of the grandmothers discovered that Pangu had returned, so she asked the young girl, "Where is he?" She doesn't know what to say. While they struggle, she sees her birthmark. That's how she realizes that the young girl was Pangu. who had somehow become young again. That's when it's finally revealed to us what happened 900 years ago, especially during those 20 years that the genie had forgotten. He was freed from his lamp and found Kion in a nearby village. At first, he thought they just looked alike, but when he saw the scars left by the dog bites, there was no doubt. For her part, she didn't remember anything and thought the genie was just a rude bully. At night, we see that even though her life was miserable whenever she could, she helped those who were worse off than her. Although because of her marks and scars, people in those places always pushed her aside. The genie wanted to use that to corrupt her, but Kion was too good. Since the genie looked Korean, she thought he was cute, and that's why she felt comfortable talking to him. After many months of work, Kion saved up money to buy a camel, but being a foreign woman, she became a victim of theft. He was able to save her and took down the thief. Instead of thanking him, she tells him that she doesn't want to see a demon like him at night again. The genie didn't listen to her and tried to cheer her up with his powers, but nothing he did seemed to work. Until he told her that he could take her to her home. She got very excited when she saw her smile. The genie's heart began to beat. After a long time, Kion was getting everything ready to leave. That's why she says goodbye to little Khalil, the genie's nephew who was born with a very fragile body. He recognizes the genie and asks him to use his magic to heal his body. But Iblis tells him that he can't do it. It doesn't matter that they're family. It turns out that the boy's power was to create magical threads capable of stopping spirits no matter how powerful they are. Then, the genie invites Kion into his lamp, and there she tells him the little she remembers about her homeland. She confesses that her favorite season is when the cherry blossoms fall. Is that why this was the same season the genie liked? Sometime later, the time to leave finally arrived. Everything was ready for her trip to Korea, but God had other plans. He made it so that a human found her lamp, and now she had to grant him his 3 wishes. The genie wanted to hurry, but his new master was the merchant who had bought Kion. Since he had lost all his fortune, he wished to be the richest man in the world. The genie granted him the wish, but people knew what kind of man he was, so even though he had money, they looked at him with contempt. So, as his second wish, he asked for all those people who despised him to die. The next day, the beggar, who was now rich, went to Kion and told him that now that he had a lot of money, he would grant him any wish. Kion replied that he didn't want anything that his own work couldn't give him. Because of that, the beggar feels offended. So he asks the genie to make the woman who rejected him surrender at his feet. The genie grants his wish, not knowing that it was Kion. Seeing her, he becomes very scared, since they were supposed to leave for Korea that night. The beggar, seeing that his wish didn't come true, tells Kion that if he can't have her, no one else will. The genie tries to protect her. Everything seemed very easy until Khalil arrives. With his magic thread, he trapped the genie and he could no longer protect Kion. The beggar takes advantage of this and stabs her with his sword, badly wounding her. Kion asks the genie to look for her in her next life, so they can have another chance to be together. He threw his lamp and asked his new master to wish to save her. In return, he will grant any wish without restrictions. But humans are greedy by nature. That's why he asked for wealth for himself. With his 3 wishes, he just kept asking for more and more gold. In the end, Kion lost his life, and there was nothing the genie could do anymore. While the whole village laughed and enjoyed themselves, the genie cried because he had lost the most important, valuable thing he had. This made him hate humans even more. That's why he ended the beggar's life, but that wasn't enough, so in the end, he took the lives of all those greedy people who laughed and enjoyed themselves while he suffered. Back in the present, it turns out that Kion's brother's soul was still trapped in the immortal body. It hadn't been exchanged as the flower genie had said. Since he loved his sister very much, he wanted to help her, so that's why he revealed it. Right? He thanks the genie Iblis, and as a reward, he frees him from his immortal body. Then we see that God had granted the genie one last wish. He asked to meet Kion in one of her lives. That's why God erased his memory and locked him away for 900 years until in the present, he met Kion again. Meanwhile, in the village, one of the grandmothers had discovered the truth that Grandma Pangu had somehow become young again. Frustrated, she goes home and demands the recipe to become young again, wanting it for herself too. The whole village asks her to calm down, but she keeps shouting that she doesn't want to die so miserable. If she were young again, she would have another chance to do things better. But before she can find her, A car comes out of nowhere and runs her over. He was one of the orphans of the immortal boy. After committing the crime, he turns himself into the police so as not to waste time. At the same time, the genie tells Kion that he recovered all his memories after seeing how sad he was. She tells him that the past doesn't matter anymore and that the only thing that matters is their future together. As for the YouTuber, his wish was granted, and his wife forgot everything. She even forgot that she changed the password to her emails, so now they couldn't reactivate their YouTube account. Because of that, she feels really bad and kept apologizing to her husband over and over again. This made the guy feel even worse, so he uses his last wish to save his father-in-law. The next day, when he had forgotten about it, his wife was very happy, and she tells him that the recovery key was sent to her father, who now seemed healthier than ever. His cancer had disappeared. Magically, the guy doesn't understand anything, but he's very happy for her. Later, the handsome bodyguard was now rich and hired his own bodyguard, but he missed his boss a lot, so he decided to use the money he left him to take care of stray dogs. Meanwhile, Kion takes his grandmother and Minji to the genie lamp and tells them that it's almost over, so they need to stay safe. Meanwhile, at night, Kion goes to Miss Kim to buy her last wish and tells her that in exchange, he will give her all his money. She agrees since she couldn't beat Kion in patience, and because of that, everything was coming to an end. That's why the angel also makes his move and takes the lamp from Kion, so that the genie loses again. When the moment of truth arrives, the dream genie puts everyone to sleep, and the immortal boy takes advantage of this to trap Iblis. His father tells him that his plan has finally been fulfilled, but the boy says that there's still something left. And that's to get rid of the other genies. That's why he kills his own father. Iblis tells him that he's more evil than he is, and that's saying something since he's the devil. The immortal boy had captured Kion. He wanted her to make her wish so he could become the only master of the lamp. But Kion had already foreseen this. That's why she used Miss Kim's wish and managed to free herself. Thanks to that, she frees the genie. And now they begin the second phase of their plan, which was to finish off the immortal. And there was only one way to do it. She had to go to the Garden of Souls and cut his flower. But the angel had already foreseen something like this. That's why he ordered his beast to steal Kion's lamp and give it to the immortal. His plan was for Kion to make his wish to save his grandmother and Minji. That's why he needed to buy time for the immortal. And that's how a fierce battle began. Meanwhile, the immortal managed to enter the lamp. No matter how much Iblis's beast tried to stop him, it couldn't do it. Grandma knew that she would die that day because she herself made the plum tree bloom. So she accepts her fate and saves Minji. Also, to buy some time, she swallows the immortal's threads. The child wanted to open her up and take out the threads, but that would take too long. So she simply tells Kion that if she doesn't make her last wish, the next one to die will be Minji. Luckily, before she can do anything to her, the village chief arrives with all the Marines. It turns out they were all trained for a situation like this, so once again, an all-out battle begins. At the same time, Iblis manages to defeat the angel, but doesn't finish him off because he tells him he has to cut off his head so that Kion can live. He then cuts the immortal's flower and thus ends his existence. The orphans wanted to finish off Kion. Luckily, the genie appears to save her. Once everything is over, she runs out to save her grandmother. But it was already too late. Her grandmother had died. Minji cries over her death since Kion couldn't do it, although he had other ways to show his discontent. On the day of the funeral, the whole town mourned her passing, even the sky itself. But Kion was the only one who couldn't shed a single tear. Sometime later, Kion is not doing well, but her grandmother had left her several notes and messages so she wouldn't give up and would keep going with her life. Miss Kim, who had forgotten everything, was very scared because she woke up with bags full of money. Since only Kion had expensive bags, she goes to her to return it. Kion tells her that the money is hers, but Miss Kim says she doesn't want it anymore, just like Kion doesn't want it either. They end up burying it. Then Minji arrives and starts taking care of Kion. She tells him he needs to finish his unfinished business. So he tries to summon the genie, but he simply doesn't respond. He eventually gets tired and goes to the desert where he first met the genie. But no matter how much he searches, the genie won't come out. After hours of walking in the scorching heat, the genie had no choice but to appear. Because if he didn't come out, Kion wasn't going to stop. She tells him that it's time to make his last wish so the genie can be free and live. Kion ignores her and wishes to feel all the emotions for just one day before making his wish. The genie bows before her and acknowledges before God that he lost the bet so that only he loses his life. Afterwards, he grants her wish and disappears. Kion completely forgets about him and begins to feel all the emotions he couldn't experience throughout his life. He feels happiness, love, empathy, and also a lot of pain. The genie, for his part, went to his brother so that he could cut off his head once and for all. But he gives him the bad news that Kion will die the next day. Anyway, that's why he wants to go save her. But the angel doesn't allow it and cuts off his head. When the sun rises, the angel's servant gives Kion her memories back. That makes her feel very happy, but also very sad because in this life, she still wasn't able to be with the genie. After hours of wandering through the desert, Kion sadly dies. Menji goes to collect her body and the village chief organizes her funeral. Even though she was a psychopath, the whole village was very sad. Time went by like this until one day Menji went to visit her friend and found out that Kion was still alive. But she was no longer a person. Now she was a genie, just as powerful or even more powerful than Iblis. Just like him, now she can also grant 3 wishes to fulfill their desires. Kion keeps her promise and tells her whole story to her best friend. Then Menji makes 2 wishes. She wants to eat with her friend every Wednesday, just like when she was human. But this time, a different dish each time. She also wishes that all underprivileged children go to her clinic. So, Kion stayed in the village granting wishes and living her life as she did when she was human. But at the Cherry Blossom Festival, Menji wrote the same message that the genie had written. Because of that, Kion can't help but cry because she misses him so much. The next day, Menji tells Kion that it's time to move on with her life. She already enjoyed her friend for a long time. So her last wish is for her to reunite with the one she loves most. After that, she forgets everything that had happened. Time passed like that, the seasons went by and the cherry trees bloomed again, but during this time nothing happened. She kept granting wishes and corrupting people. She continued with her life very smoothly. But as the cherry blossom petals fell, the genie appears and suddenly kisses her. She gets very excited because now she actually has emotions. Kion doesn't understand why it took so long. If Menji's wish was granted, but it turns out it wasn't because of Menji's wish. At least not 100%, but because her grandmother never went to heaven. She stayed by the angel's side to torment him and beg him to please release the genie from hell. Since she was very persistent, the angel had no choice but to give in. That's how Kion and the genie were together again. Now that they were both genies, they could spend eternity together. But even though they were very powerful, they didn't have any money, so they had to get to work. Although Kion tells Iblis that he's the only poor one, because she does have money, she dug up the money that Miss Kim gave her. A long time later, they were still granting wishes and corrupting people. Although the genie was very naive and often got scammed, the 2 of them were still very happy together. And later on, they brought the genie's beast back to life again. So they were all together, like one big happy family, even though they were a dysfunctional family. Because Kion was always mistreating the poor genie, many years later we see Kion, the genie. They dance through the Menji desert every year, just like Kion did when she was alive. She would go to the desert to watch the genies dance. That's how this story ends. I hope you enjoyed the summary. Which one is one of the best dramas of this year? Thank you very much for watching the video until the end. Don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any summaries. See you in the next story.